Hey everyone, we are live here with a very awesome JavaScript developer, Sacha Greif.
Hey everybody, hi from Japan.
Thank you so much for joining us. So let's kick things off. First of all, you're in Osaka, Japan.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah, I am.
wonderful city. If you ever make it to Japan, you have to hit Osaka. They've got the most fun and gregarious people. Um, so, Sacha,
Yeah,
how did you end up in Osaka? Take us back a few years and how you got there.
sure. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I'll give you some background on what I'm doing now in Osaka and how I ended up here. So the main reason why I moved here was that my wife was actually doing her PhD here in Osaka, and she just finished. And before that, so originally um, I studied computer science at university. So I kind of have this technical background, but I pretty soon realized that I wasn't that into like hardcore computer science and very theoretical problems. And what I really liked was more the visual side and the interactive side of things. So I kind of became a self-taught designer, and I was doing a lot of UI design work for a while. I did a lot of freelancing, working with startups. And then something I had wanted to do for a long time was try working on my own projects. So we moved to Japan about 5 years ago, and it turned out that was a really good time for me to kind of, turn a page on my freelancing career and start this new career, which isn't really a career, but it's just what I do now, where I build side projects and try different ideas and try to make a living like that.
Yeah, so you've described yourself as like a professional side project builder, and you've built so many exciting side projects that I think a lot of people in our audience will have heard of. Um, One of the technologies you've really uh, done a lot of work around is Meteor JS.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what drew you to it?
So I really like Meteor, and yeah, I've spent a lot of time over the past couple years working with it. And by the way, I should mention that I'm not actually affiliated with the Meteor development group or anything. I just really enjoy the technology. So whatever I say today, like, don't take it as coming from the official people that run Meteor. But yeah, what I really liked about Meteor at the time when I first started using it, I was still fresh off being more of a UI designer, and I had done some front end work, some jQuery stuff, but I hadn't really done any like real full stack work. And Meteor was really cool because for the first time, at least for me, you could just build your whole app with one language, JavaScript, and with a single framework. And that really appealed to me because like a big barrier I had with things like Rails is that not only did I have to learn all these new concepts like routes and migrations or like backend stuff I didn't really know anything about, but I also had to learn Ruby on top of that. And looking back, okay, Ruby is not a bad language or anything, but at the time it was just too much for me, for my little front-end engineer brain. And so when Meteor came along, it was full JavaScript. That was really cool. Plus, the whole concept of having an all-in-one framework with the database just worked and the accounts just worked. That was really magical. Yeah.
Yeah, and Meteor was famous because they had like the coolest little hello world. Like basically
Yeah.
within seconds, you just type like I think it was like Meteor up or something like that, and suddenly your website was up on. They would actually host websites as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They really nailed the onboarding like developer experience, and it was super appealing. I think to this day, I don't think there's anything that comes close to like the original Meteor experience. Now there's things like Next.js. There's also my own project, which I can talk about a bit later, but still, I think Meteor is, probably for a long time, it will be like one of the pioneers of this kind of, super easy onboarding.
Yeah, and you actually,
And,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, if anyone watching has tried to learn Meteor, there's a very good chance that you've heard of Sacha's book called Discovering Meteor.
Right. So what ended up happening is the reason I wanted to learn Meteor was to build a project that ended up becoming a sidebar, which you can find at sidebar.io. It's like a newsletter of design links. But to build that, so I learned Meteor, and then I got a lot of help from a developer called Tom Coleman, who was just, also like me, just discovering Meteor at the time, and he was hanging out a lot on RC, and so we ended up building this open source app called Telescope together to kind of support what became Sidebar. And so what happened is we spent so much time, kind of working on this and learning all this cool stuff about Meteor. We realized, well, we know all this stuff, and there's nobody else that really has dug as deep as we have, outside, of course, of the Meteor company. And so why not write a book to kind of share that knowledge with everybody else? And so that book was Discover Meteor, and it did really well. And I think, to this day, it's one of the main Meteor books, even though it's a bit out of date now, but it's still, selling a little bit. And people, every time I meet Meteor developers, there's a good chance they've read Discover Meteor.
And now, of course, you're building your new tool, which I really want to learn more about personally. Vulcan.js, named after our favorite race on Star Trek.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I built this open source app named Telescope with Meteor, and that was kind of the genesis of the book as well, because we reinvested what we learned building that app in the book. And the concept behind Telescope was basically an open source Hacker News or product hunt app. So you could build your own product hunt for cars or watches or sports, whatever your interest was. It was a really easy way to deploy your own community, basically. And so I worked on that. So I launched that maybe, what is it, 4 years ago? Yeah. And I kept working, I kept iterating. And eventually I realized that the really valuable part in that app wasn't so much the features, but it was the underlying infrastructure, the framework part. And so, a bit like how 37 Signals, they took Basecamp and then they extracted Rails out of that. And because they knew it could be valuable to other people. So we're doing something a bit similar with Telescope, wherein we're trying to extract out the core, and that's what we call Vulkan. So we've recently did kind of a soft launch. So there's a very minimal homepage you can find at vulcanjs.org. And the idea here is really to recreate the original Meteor experience where everything just works out of the box, except this time with the more modern tools, of the JavaScript ecosystem. So things like React, Redux, GraphQL, Apollo. And these are all really powerful tools and really flexible tools, but they have I think it's fair to say they have a higher learning curve compared to the original Meteor vision, at least. And
Absolutely,
yeah.
Meteor, just to put things in perspective, Meteor was like as simple as you can make JavaScript, in my opinion. Like I experimented with it. I went to a hackathon and built a hackathon project with it, and it was just incredibly easy to pick up. It really did take like this huge open field of different JavaScript libraries and kind of wrangled them together into like, here are a few quick tools that work well together. exactly like what you were saying. You made the comparison with Ruby on Rails and how that tied the Ruby ecosystem together into one unified framework.
Yeah, I mean, about JavaScript fatigue, and I think it's part of it is a bit of a meme, and it's kind of trendy to talk about that. But there's kind of some truth to it in the sense that we went from like, oh, just use jQuery to, well, there's Webpack and Babel, and where you're transpiling your JavaScript and you're using TypeScript and in just a couple of years. So it's like JavaScript is all grown up now, but the people who were used to jQuery, they're kind of lost now. And even with Meteor, I think the same thing is happening with the Meteor community. Like the people who, like me, actually were really seduced by this original vision of an all-in-one framework can be a bit lost in the new world of like grown-up JavaScript. So yeah, Vulkan is really trying to bridge that gap, and you have all the tools and the power of React and Redux and so on, but at the same time, you're not really thrown like headfirst into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah. So talk about the development of this. Like, how are you going about building Vulkan? How did you choose the specific tools? You mentioned GraphQL, which is something I'm extremely excited about. But I can totally see if you're a new developer, trying to dive directly into GraphQL would be a pretty big jump, because it's like REST and graph databases and databases themselves all kind of rolled into one tool.
Yeah, so I'm actually following the lead of so MDG, the Meteor Development Group, is the company behind Meteor framework, and their new project is called Apollo, and it's actually a GraphQL client and server. So it's a toolkit around GraphQL. And like they're really smart people. So when I saw that they were getting into the GraphQL space, I started looking into it. And so I'm kind of following their lead in the sense that I also adopted Apollo inside first Telescope and now Vulkan. And GraphQL is really, really cool. Like I really like the idea of having this kind of standard syntax, standard format, and standard pattern of querying data from the client, because okay, I guess REST is a bit like that, but it's still not quite like GraphQL in the sense that you have to write a lot of custom code, whereas GraphQL, you really have these patterns. You have your mutations, you have your resolvers, and especially like what we've been trying to do in Vulkan is give you these presets. Whereas we tell you, okay, a resolver, for example, is you can think of it as an endpoint for a specific set of data. So for example, you would have a resolver for a list of documents. And so in Vulkan, we kind of have these blanks that you just fill in with your own code, and then it just works. So it creates the whole data layer for you.
Awesome.
So it's probably something very abstract right now. But the idea is really to have that all-in-one aspect, but at the same time based on standards, right? And not to be like, not try to lock you in, but on the other hand, try to almost teach you, like, here's our way of doing things. But if you follow that, you'll find out that actually it leads to like the broader ecosystem, because it's kind of an introduction.
Okay. So just to be clear, by using the Vulkan framework, it'll provide kind of a nice, smooth learning curve for some of these technologies like GraphQL.
Yeah, because for example, so Apollo is powered by Redux on the client. So all the data is stored in Redux. So even if you know literally nothing about Redux, you can still use the Redux DevTools to inspect your client-side data. And at some point, you want to go a bit further above that, and then you can start using like the actual Redux APIs. And you're not starting from scratch, because you already know kind of how Redux works and the concepts. And I really like this approach, like where it's like you have these tools that you can use, and you don't really need to know how they work, but at least they're already the right tools if you do want to go further along.
Right. So so that's a very good point about what you're doing with Vulkan. It's like if you want to leave Vulkan's framework at some point, you're already very well equipped to be able to go out and function
Exactly,
in
yeah.
the wild world of JavaScript.
And that was a bit what people were complaining about with the original Meteor, right? Because it was super easy to get started, but originally, at least, it had its own front-end framework, it had its own data layer, its own account system, and they were all really meshed together, which was good on one hand, but then you couldn't really transfer that knowledge to non-Meteor apps. And since, these days, I think it's much more sensible to use React, Redux, GraphQL, Apollo. And by the way, Vulkan still uses Meteor, but the skills that you will learn by using Vulkan are much more easily transferable to other platforms, other stacks.
Awesome. And so when you say you're working on Vulkan, tell us a little bit about the day-to-day. Like, what are some of the current technical challenges? What are you? Who are you working with? How many contributors are there? Yeah. What's it like day-to-day working on Vulkan?
Yeah. So I think every open source project is different, but at least for Vulkan, there's me, team member in France, Xavier. There's a really prolific contributor in China, Comus, and there's a lot. I mean, obviously I can't name everybody, but there's a lot of other people throughout the world that report bugs, build their own projects. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about an open source project, like, contributing code isn't by any means the only way of actually contributing. Like, you can report bugs. That's one way. You can write documentation, write tutorials. So it's all super important for a healthy open source project. It's like a plant in a way. You need sun, you need water, you need nutrients. It's not about just putting the plant under a lamp and that's it. So I think a mistake a lot of first-time open source maintainers make is they focus too much on one single thing, like, oh, I'm going to get GitHub. But if you get 5,000 stars, but you're still the only person contributing code, then the project won't be sustainable. So that's something I learned the hard way. I think the first version of Telescope was pretty well received, but I never really managed to attract other contributors. And so this time around, I'm trying to maybe listen more to what developers need and kind of go towards them more instead of just being like, oh, I'm going to be #1 on Product Hunt or whatever, because that's a nice ego boost. But are you going to really attract the people who can really help you? It might not always be the case,
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I see so many people who are swinging for the fences, as we say in the U.S. baseball term, and they're really trying to, like, just go heads down and do whatever they need to do, and kind of they burn out along the way. But if you focus instead on building kind of a very stable team of contributors, then you'll have a lot more staying power, and that's the name of the game. I mean, if DHH had sat down and said, I'm going to build Rails, and just built it real quick and then walked away from it, then it probably would have died. It needed his continuing work, and it needed the community that he was able to build around it to sustain itself.
Yeah, I think we get kind of a warped view from like the startup ecosystem, where people talk about 10% growth, like month over month or something ridiculous like that. And if you wanna, you can't compare that with your current situation if you don't have the funding, if you're not in the Bay Area. You have to be in it much more for the long game, right? So you have to be like, okay, does this make sense on a 10-year basis and not on a 10-month basis, for example?
Yeah.
At least that's how, for now, that's how I see my own situation. I'm in Japan. I'm not making any money, at least not from Vulkan right now. I can't hire anybody. So it's a very different approach where we're trying to be like sustainable and people be happy to contribute rather than just running after growth and likes and stars and metrics.
Yeah, all those things you said are good for your ego, but not good for your long-term viability.
Mm.
And speaking of making those kinds of decisions and getting finding contributors to surround you and being sustainable, choosing technology that is going to be sustained and isn't just like the new hotness that is going to come and go. You've written this amazing guide that's, first of all, it's worth going and checking it out just for the web design alone. It's beautiful. Never seen a survey result page that's this beautiful. But you wrote this amazing report called The State of JavaScript in 2016. And it goes through and it chronicles how all these different technologies are doing and what people perceive about them, the relative strengths and weaknesses. And can you talk about that a little bit and what inspired you to build that?
Yeah, so what inspired me was, like I was talking about before, the trend of complaining about JavaScript fatigue. It was pretty obvious to me that there was a real it was a real meme going around, and people were really, whether wrong or right, they were really feeling that. So I wanted to build a survey, just first of all for myself, but also for these people to try and figure out, well, is it as bad as people say? Is the ecosystem that fragmented, or is there actually kind of an easy answer to most questions? And I think there is a pretty easy answer, like React is kind of the default answer these days. And if not React, maybe Vue. So I feel like those two are pretty safe bets, because what happens if you're a developer is you go on Hacker News and you're like, oh, there's a new framework that faster than React and smaller than Vue. And then the next day, oh, there's a new framework that's like faster and smaller than the one before. And then you get this false sense that that's so fast and leaving you behind and there's no way you can keep up. But actually, you can't really compare like a framework like that and React, which is maintained by Facebook and has, thousands or hundreds of thousands, however many users, a huge ecosystem. So my goal with the survey was, and I don't want to put down like smaller frameworks, by the way, but it's just like, let's find out who is actually using what, and are people happy with it, and is React going to go away in 6 months? Because you do read things like that, like, oh yeah, React is just the latest flavor of the day.
Yeah, unfortunately, those kinds of grand statements always pull in lots of readers, and they always do. Like whenever I go to Hacker News, without fail, I'll see some article basically just shredding some framework and saying, oh, it's going to die soon or whatever. And people have been saying the same thing about jQuery for years. jQuery is dead, and you look at it, and it's still got a ridiculously good install base. And
and I think the survey results showed, at least to me, that React is not going anywhere. Like, because the main thing I wanted to know is not only how many people use a technology, but are they happy with it? Because something like Angular, for example, huge install base, but you also hear a lot of complaints about it. And most developers would rather use something else for their next projects. And on the other hand, React and Vue, it was very clear that people are happy with them and they do enjoy using them. So that was really the most striking thing for me from that survey is it's not all equal, it's not all bad. Some frameworks do have like staying power because their user, believe it or not, actually enjoy writing JavaScript apps with them.
Yeah. So do you think that like developer experience, as people have been calling it, do you think that that's the main determinant of whether people will continue to use it? Because I know jQuery, people loved using jQuery when it came out. It's pretty easy to pick up, powerful. And now React, pretty easy to pick up, very powerful. Do you think that developer experience is the #1 factor, or how would you rate the overall factors of what makes developers stick with the technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of factors. Like, I think first of all, you shouldn't underestimate like the importance of the actual technology. React is not the most performant framework anymore, but it's still pretty good, and they're actually rewriting it with like this new React Fiber thing. And so, the team behind React is like, it's hard to find better engineers, like, or same thing with Redux and Dan Abramov. All these guys, they're not just some random people who wrote their own framework like me. They're like actual software engineers working for Facebook. So that's super important. They're not gonna, mislead you into using bad patterns.
Right. Yeah, they've got a lot of people
And
looking
then,
over their shoulder.
yeah. And based on that, the ecosystem, are there enough packages to do what you want? Enough people writing about it, writing tutorials, documentation, sites like Egghead, for example, which have like great video content. So it's really like a whole set of factors. But I think React, I remember, I think I saw that the first React demo like years and years ago. And like I was in San Francisco randomly. And so I met one of the React developers, and like he was talking about performance, right? And he wasn't, so it was clear from the start that their focus was really on performance, on scalability, on all these things that are still really important.
Right. And as you said, like even React isn't as performant as you can get. There's like this, it's almost kind of like like you imagine like those kind of diamonds where things trade off and there's like a certain amount of surface area. And sometimes, in sacrificing performance, you're sacrificing, or in trying to boost performance, you're sacrificing readability, or trying to boost the value, like the number of different things you can do. You're sacrificing the ability to onboard people. Do you think that there's like a meta that like no framework is going to be able to be absolutely better just because of inherent trade-offs?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of these really performant frameworks, sometimes they don't support older browsers as well. And that's how they can get away with being faster. But the important thing is having something that's like good enough, right? Sometimes it can be a mistake to over optimize, because at some point, just diminishing returns and like the 80-20 law and all that, you reach a point where is it really going to make a difference if I use Preact instead of React? And maybe it does for your specific use case, but I would say most of the time you can probably just use React.
All right. Well, that's kind of been our philosophy at freeCodeCamp. Like we're using React. We're currently rebuilding our entire platform to run on React and make it all a single page app and everything. And it seems like React is just kind of the go-to tool, and Redux has emerged as the go-to way of managing state and everything. And as a result, like a lot of this JavaScript fatigue may kind of go away, hopefully, as people just converge on certain stacks, like happened with Python to some extent and happened with Ruby for sure.
I don't think people complaining about it will ever go away, but hopefully the thing itself will go away. Like I think that's what's happening. There's some it's always like this, like there's a period of like just explosion with tons of alternatives, and then it kind of settles down into a more defined meta, I guess.
Are you planning to
I like to play
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I like to play Hearthstone. So I'm a big Hearthstone player, and it's the same thing when new cards come out. Like people play all kinds of crazy combinations, and then it settles down and everybody is playing the same decks. So I think the same thing can be said about frameworks.
Yeah, and a lot of games have kind of that rock, scissors, paper, like certain approaches, certain strategies are stronger against other strategies than they are, some strategies. So there's always kind of like a ecosystem of one animal eats this animal and this animal eats this animal, kind of the meta I described. Yeah. I'm glad you're familiar with the term. I kind of threw it out and I wasn't sure. But yeah, that's great that you're playing Hearthstone and you're familiar with a lot of those concepts. A lot of these games, they're just constantly introducing new features that really force you to be on your toes and constantly learning.
Yeah, it's good training to be a JavaScript developer for sure.
So are you planning to do a State of JavaScript for 2017 as well? Is that something you're considering doing?
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I'll probably wait, yeah, to do it at about the same time as last year, so like next September maybe. Just I feel right now the result would still be pretty similar. I don't know of like major developments in the JavaScript world, so I want to give it a little bit more time. Maybe also, I don't know if I should build like my own survey system or something, because last time it was a bit painful to set up I don't know how many questions there were. There were a lot. So using like an online form builder, that was a bit slow and a bit painful to do.
Yeah, I can tell you that we're doing a survey right now. Actually, if you're watching this, check it out. FreeCodeCamp's 2017 New Coder Survey. I'll link to it below. But basically, we've interviewed, I think, so far about 17,000 people. We're using
Wow.
Typeform. So Typeform is like Google. You can do this with Google Forms too. With Typeform, it's got really good conditional logic, and it's got like built-in reports and everything. It's like $35 a month. So basically, $35 a month to use Typeform instead of just using the free Google Forms is what we're paying. But you might try that. That's just like
That's what I use actually.
Oh, you did?
It's really cool. Yeah, it's a great experience, but it's just really slow to use their backend, like their admin thing. Once you have 80 questions, or I don't know how many I had, it just slows down to a crawl. And
yeah, I think some of that though may just be innately complicated once you have that big of a survey with that much branching logic and everything.
I was gonna say they should use React.
Maybe you should tweet at them and recommend. Maybe they could try a Vulkan or something like
that. Maybe, yeah, that's a good idea.
So where can people find you online?
So you can find me on Twitter at Sacha Greif, SACHAGREIF. There's also my personal site, sachagreif.com, which I just redesigned, and I just realized today it's already out of date because it still points to the old Telescope homepage instead of the more recent Vulkan homepage. And other than that, I'm always hanging out in the Vulkan Slack chat room or the Apollo Slack chat room. So those are also good places to find me. And I'm not really hard to find. If people want to get in touch, I'm sure they can.
Awesome. Well, I'm thrilled that you came on. I'm thrilled that you've written all these amazing Medium articles, which are so helpful for people who are new to React and new to JavaScript in general. We hope to continue to publish your awesome articles on our Medium publication, and we're very excited about the future of Vulkan, and I'm excited to try it out at some point.
Yeah. I'm actually giving like one-on-one live demonstrations these days. So if anybody listening to this, wants to learn more, you can ping me, and then we can jump on Skype, and I can walk you through the framework.
Well, if you ever get a chance to live stream those, I'd be very interested in watching them as well. You could build up a lot of YouTube videos, like kind of real-time documentation, I guess.
Yeah, I do actually have like one up on the Telescope YouTube channel. Maybe we can link to that in the show notes or something.
Awesome. Well, Sacha, thank you so much for joining us very late in Osaka, Japan.
No problem. Yeah, it's
like midnight there. And
it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and I want to thank everybody who tuned in live. Thank you so much. It's very motivating to see everybody who's tuning in to watch these interviews live, and have a wonderful week. And Sacha, good luck working on Vulkan. We're all very excited to see what you do with it.
Cool. Yeah, I hope you get some more news about Vulkan in the next couple weeks.
All right. Cheers. Have a beautiful day.
See ya.